from our point of view, what is important for today's meeting is that we get a chance to basically tell you more about our policy on producer organization in the area of organic production. And why we find this important is because we think our producer organization can help farmers to stand their ground in the food supply chain. And we've had certain experiences with the Institute of Producer Organizations that I think make us, accurately believe that in certain circumstances, they can actually be a boon to farmers, simply because they do a couple of things that I will further dwell on that are in essence possibly undoable by farmers on their own. But before I go there, maybe we thought I give you a short overview of where our organic policy is also, placed in the overall strategy of things. And that would be indicated on my next slide. So we're coming from a background where we've had, as you know, the farm to fork. Organic has been existing before, of course, the farm to fork, but definitely I think it got a boost through the European Green Deal and the farm to fork and the biodiversity strategies as set out in Commission documents. Organic as such is a production method that is on balance clearly beneficial to all the things that the Green Deal considers as resources that we need to handle in a sustainable manner. And to put this into music, not least, part of the European Green Deal communications have been certain targets that we ought to reach by 2030, and some of which obviously are highly relevant to the organic production method. The first that comes to mind is, of course, the kind of target that we would get to a percentage of arable land under organic production of 25% by 2030. But there are also other targets like the ones on fertilizer use, which we would like to see reduced by 20% in 2030, and the loss of nutrients, which we would like to see reduced by 50% in 2030, but also the reduction of pesticides by 50%. So all of this is, of course, things that the producers who do organic are not using, and therefore organic, of course, comes in big time under these targets. I think I would be amiss if I wasn't to mention the current high food inflation environment, and also the war in Ukraine, because that, of course, has had a lot of people focus also on whether the European Union is able to guarantee food security. And I think our view is that definitely this is the case within Europe. We have certain policies that we can fall back on and that have served as well in basically being able to truthfully claim that our food security is ensured, such as the Common Agricultural Policy, but also the internal market policies, both policies which have already served as well under the onslaught of the COVID crisis. But definitely we need to also be aware that certain changed circumstances may also lead to the need to basically adopt certain short-term measures that try to ensure food security, maybe also in a more global context where we have to contribute, at least we can contribute to, as you know, we are a net exporter of foodstuff ever since, I think, 2010. And in a nutshell, I think that is it. I think we believe and we walk the talk that in the long run, climate change, the danger coming through climate change to our productions, to our soils, to our water, etc., are definitely the long-term challenges that we face, and that's why we're going to double down on the Green Deal, as it were. While this does not prevent us, the Commission and the Member States and the European Parliament to pull together and basically decide on short-term measures that are basically trying again to also, enhance food security at the global level. And you've seen this reflected in some of the measures that have been taken in the wake of the COVID, but especially in the wake of the war in Ukraine. Voilà. Next slide, please. The Common Agriculture Policy is, of course, supporting the move towards these targets. It mainly does so through the national strategic plans that the member states will implement. And there, one of the, I would say, lighthouse measures that will facilitate getting where we want to get by 2030 is the eco schemes that you see up on the slide. But also there are other measures that we want to step up in order to make sure that we can get to these targets that we've set for ourselves. And one is definitely also the AGRI component of the Common Agricultural Policy, which we will try to step up, enhance, and make more targeted. And definitely transition, for instance, to organic production systems, etc., would be part of the portfolio in this regard. The other, I think, strong component of the the 9 specific objectives of the Common Agricultural Policy in the future that you see also here up on the slide. One very important component is for us also to ensure that farmers are competitive, that they can earn a living, and that they can do so ideally also in the markets. And for this reason, we have one component of our policies, and it's part and parcel of the Common Agricultural Policy, which is to improve competitiveness and strengthen the position of farmers in the food supply chain. We've worked a lot on this in my own department. We have, as you know, recently adopted and implemented, together with the member states, a directive on unfair trading practices, which basically lays down behavioral rules that should, provide a certain degree of fairness in the food supply chain. But we also think that, again, producer organization and the Institute of Recognized Producer Organizations, but also the Institute of, cooperatives in member states, etc., can be a vector that can be used to improve the standing of farmers in the food supply chain, including the organic farmers. Next slide, please. Now, you will not be completely ignorant about these figures, but just to repeat them, we are at this point in time at a percentage of 9 percentage points of total EU agricultural land under organic farming. The kind of configuration or which cultures and which products this concerns, you can also see on the basis of 2019 figures. What's of course very important is that, and that's part and parcel of the action plan, which I will come to on my next slide, is that for the organic target, it's very important that also demand at the consumer end of the supply chain increases in a commensurate way. And there are some positive signs, although against the high food inflation that we face just right now, we must admit that the challenge hasn't become any easier, as indeed what we do see in the market is partly that against high food inflation, consumers have sometimes a tendency to do what you call trading down, and that's definitely a challenge. Hopefully, one that will prove to be transient. Next slide, please. So there are three axes on the basis of which the organic action plan our colleagues have drawn up is relying. It's what I've just mentioned, consumer demand, very important. It's helping farmers to convert to organic, and thereby also trying to put some focus on the working of the value chain. And last but not least, examples for organic leading the way in terms of getting better outcomes in the area of sustainability. Next slide. The one action of the action plan reads in particular on strengthening the organization, the degree of organization of the food chain. I think there is a kind of consultation process ongoing where we're trying to focus especially on the specific questions, an analysis of what is going on at this point in time in terms of organization of primary producers in particular, of organic in the food supply chain. How could this organization be improved, be incentivized, be rendered more attractive? To basically also map the ways producer organizations can receive support for the purposes they are set up. And finally, a question about whether in the time of COVID and crisis, has there been any trend in terms of unfair trading practices that would be particularly relevant in the organic field? And that's I think something that, who knows, maybe we can also have a possibility to discuss and hear people about these questions today. Next slide. What we've seen in our traditional work on producer organizations, which I think ever since they got to be quite a successful model especially in the area of fruit and vegetables, which we were also trying to promote ever since 2013, etc., is that they can indeed help farmers be strong partners in the food supply chain for various reasons. They can obviously help farmers to concentrate supply, thereby increasing their bargaining power in the confronts with often quite concentrated downstream market players. But there are also economies of scope that producer organizations can allow farmers to enjoy and benefit from, like joint marketing, elaborating business strategies at a larger scale. They can very simply put also help with machinery, technical knowledge, logistical assistance, help with the management of the quality of the products, and in general, obviously, transfer knowledge. We know from the AGRIs that I think farmers really listen to other farmers when they get together, and this kind of knowledge exchange, of course, is something that can happen very well within a producer organization. Next slide, please. The way, and that is where maybe my presentation gets a little bit less inspiring, Alistair, but it needs to be said. We have a kind of regime within our basic act, which is the Common Market or regulation, that governs producer organizations. And the nice thing is, so you have recognition, being acknowledged and recognized as a way to basically boost the value and importance of producer organizations, wired into this common market regulation. And we therefore talk then, once this is done, of recognized producer organizations. Now, we're not saying that in each and every case, a recognized producer organization is the right economic way to go, but at least we would like our primary producers to know what is in it, so to speak, and what they can get out of it, before they would decide not to even, contemplate joining in such an entity to basically confront the markets together and possibly in a stronger position. There are certain criteria that are necessary for producer organizations to get recognized. I won't go through all of them. They are set out on this slide. If you want to, you can read them up in the regulation itself. It's Article 152. Basically, that should allow us to make sure that the institute that will get certain privilege through the Common Market Organization, i.e. this recognized producer organization, and I get to the privilege in a second, that they are really genuine, organizations of producers, and not just set up, to basically either, get to some money pot or to get this regulatory privilege which exists. So this is in essence, I think, why there are certain conditions as this slide tries to, communicate. Next slide, please. I've just said that there is certain privilege that recognized producer organizations can basically enjoy under our regulatory regime, but also under our, assistance, programs as enshrined in the strategic plan regulation. And for the regulatory part, I think this slide sums up what it is. Basically, it's derogations that producer organizations can enjoy from classical competition law. We have been fighting very hard in my own department to make sure that these derogations are shored up and where necessary actually expanded. It was, I tell you, sometimes very tough going, but by now I think we are in a quite good position. And lo and behold, at the occasion of the last reform, we have been able even to add, together with the Parliament and the Council, a provision, Article 210A, which basically reads on sustainability payloads of arrangements of farmers, but not only of farmers and possibly processors and retailers that would have sustainability objectives. And there again, a specific derogation has been introduced that should further show up the kind of space for maneuver for these entities without having to, possibly fear that they are stepping over the line in terms of competition law. But the regulatory side of things is, of course, not all. Next slide, please. Recognized producer organizations are also, as I said, enjoying the possibility to get funding under, sectoral programs. And that is a novelty that has been introduced by the last reform. It's not only fruit and vegetables and olive oil that can get such operational programs funded, but it's now every sector that, in theory, if the member state so decides in its national plan, can get financed and aid through such EU means, and thereby, strengthen again, ideally, the kind of objectives and ambitions of producer organizations as they try to, ensure that their part of the cake is going to the primary producers. It's again, and that would be my final word, a decision that farmers, of course, need to take on the basis of the evidence, on the basis of, considerations of the economy, of, even practical feasibility. But we are really deeply convinced also by all the evidence that we've seen from the sectors where this policy already exists for a longer time, that there are certain cases where this really is a way and an avenue that primary producers can take that pays off. And we are doing a lot in order to basically create regulatory environment and an assistance environment that would be, usable and that would facilitate that choice of producer organizations, also in the organic, so to speak, sector. Now, I know there may be things that organic producers would find desirable to have. And then it would be interesting to hear about such things from the participants in this meeting today. I think that would be one of the purposes, at least from the point of view of the Commission. Now, I've seen in the chat a question. Well, the wine envelopes that are available for assistance in the sector, they have been continued. So in wine, it's really state envelopes that member states can use on the basis of certain measures that are spelled out in the regulation in order to help the wine sector. Apiculture has also a very specific form of aid. So there is aid for these sectors as well, but they don't fit exactly into this, Institute of Recognized Producer Organizations. And with this, I think, Alistair, I stop here and hand back to you.